welcome to What the Heck's, your source for Warhammer Underworlds and under 30 attacks made as a reaction, but that still didn't hit. I'm your co-host, Davy, and with me is one of our other co-hosts, Phil. How are you doing tonight, Phil?
Hey, I'm doing all right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good to hear. The context is we are recording on the 28th of February, which means Adepticon is closing in desperately quickly. And we got some good news, not to jump too quick to what's going on with you, but got some good news in that you are now going to make it.
Yeah. There's a whole host of reasons for holding off, but I finally got registered. I didn't quite wait until the very last minute.
Yeah.
I was probably 8 hours prior to the sign up cutoff or about that, but officially registered. Going to play in both tournaments for Underworlds.
Cool.
So should be interesting.
Yeah.
Excited to see everybody who shows up. I know it's a smaller crew this year. Both tournaments are in the 20s for registration right now.
Okay.
So I'll take it.
Yeah.
I know people probably wanted champs, and it's what it is. You can't change what GW is going to do. So just roll with it.
Yeah, and we got shamed by some of the other podcasts on our network that are running events. There's a Friday Warcry event that Dogs of Warcry is running, and there's a Gibbering Dome Path to Glory event being run by Path to Story. So we maybe next year we'll try and feel things out earlier. I think we've just made some assumptions about what was going to be there.
Yeah, I mean it's the first year it hasn't been championship, so like we just assumed.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, there's going to be a GW event. It's going to be championship. It's going to be a 2-day thing. It's going to be great. And then I was like looking at the registration, and it's like, there's no tournament on here even at all run by GW, huh?
Yeah,
what's that about?
Yeah. But we'll be talking a lot more about Adepticon, more so once it already happens. We've kind of talked about some of the meta things and covered some of that with our talk about the tournament we ran recently, some of our considerations and all that. We are going to talk today, as you are hearing this, if you're listening right as it releases, the Arenai would have just gone on pre-order. This is 5 more Daughters of Cain or Witch Elves if you're looking at old world sort of stuff. Sort of elven gladiators that are getting in the mix here. So more on that in just a second. We'll be kind of doing a rundown of first thoughts and our impressions after a little bit of play experience with them, and letting you know. But before we do that, a couple of community shout outs. One kind of we've mentioned this guy's stuff often enough, but Wathlab has done an overhaul. I don't know if you've looked at these yet, but he's done an overhaul of 4 older war bands in there. So they basically taking very old or maybe outdated or war bands that are maybe just a little underpowered with their in-faction stuff. So in this case, I think it's, if I'm remembering right, it's Sepulchral Guard, Wormspat, Blade Coven, and maybe Spike Claw Swarm, if I remember right. So just kind of bringing them up, buffing them to sort of modern standards and such, which isn't to say that any of those are necessarily like underpowered at any given minute. But if you look through some of those decks, if you look through like Nurgle's Rivals deck, it's a pretty shocking affair. And so they kind of get by on the strength of their fighters and their ability and all that sort of thing. Anyway, So this is a cool idea of bringing them up to speed. I really like the effort that's gone into that. We'll have a link to it in the show notes, but also a good place to find that is there's the Vassal Discord will have a link for content creators, and you can kind of scroll through there and see what people are doing. And that is that. I think we've already talked to Adepticon. That was kind of our other main community shout out.
Yep.
So we got some old numbers. Registration is actually closing today.
Closed today at noon. So as we are recording, it is since passed.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it is possible to still register in person now. It's just the online portal is now closed.
Okay.
So if you show up and you're like, man, I really wanted to play in that Underworlds tournament, I think you can still do that, although they're going to have to like print you a badge the day of or something. It won't be the fancy plastic card. And
Sure.
I was actually reading up a bit on like what happens if you do want to just join in last minute. And it sounds like it is doable as long as there's open spots. So
cool. All right. We also usually cover what the hex is going on with you. So Phil, what the hex is going on with you?
Yeah. So as Adepticon is rapidly approaching, I've been trying to nail down more of exactly what I'm going to play. I've done some play with black powders that I enjoy, but I also don't know yet what the status of the beta rules is going to be at Adepticon.
Oh, yes,
so
great point.
Is a big old question mark for whether or not I would even consider playing them, because if they are not using the beta rules, I don't think I could run them at all. So the other option is Starblood Stalkers, which I've played a lot.
Are you familiar with that warband at all?
You know, I maybe have tried them out a time or two.
Yeah.
And that's mostly the other reason why they're my sort of other option, is just I've got the reps with them. I've played them since they came out, and so kind of know them forwards and backwards. But figuring them out in Nemesis has been a bit of a challenge. It's been fun but difficult, mostly because of how aggressive the opponents have been, and that is not something that the little skinks tend to do a great job with.
Yeah.
But yeah, and they're also mostly painted, so it saves me a whole lot of time of having to paint a new warband.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
Which painting in crunch time, I mean, I've done it both of the previous Adepticons we've gone to, and I wasn't happy with the results in either one, but I was like, hey, I got to get some colors down.
I was just rooting through my model storage, trying to find for figures for our last week's league night, which we finally got to after like I don't know, 3 weeks, almost 3 weeks of cancellations for repeated snowstorms.
Yeah.
And I kind of dug down and got to see my Miari's purifiers, and I was like, oh God, oh man, that was really unfortunate. I had to rush through those guys so fast.
The paint was flying fast.
Yeah. The one thing I can say about them is that they definitely have paint on them. So,
and in some ways that is better than bare plastic, but
and I'm thinking I almost certainly made that joke a year ago. So sorry, everybody.
An oldie, but a goodie.
Yeah, I know. Just a little time to marinate, a little time to age a little bit and gain some flavor.
Exactly.
I am doing the exact opposite of you. I mentioned the league. I don't know why I didn't do this from the start, but all of a sudden I was like, because Skylar kind of sends these intermittent emails to say, hey, we saw these many warbands like out. And I'm like, oh man, it would be cool to like really bring that number up. I don't think, I think I need to abandon the quest because I don't think I can get us to like full representation. I was on a one-man crusade to like try and bring us up to all 47, about to be 48.
Yeah.
And we're going to fall a little bit short because I don't think I have enough momentum to do it on my own. I don't know if enough other people, because correctly, a lot of our people are practicing for Adepticon events. I think once I realized that I was not going to get to do the Grand Clash, and I'm really happy the Dice Heroes are doing an event because it gives me a chance to do something, and I certainly would like to compete in that. But I took a little bit of the pressure off, and I was like, I don't. I'm not quite as motivated. So what I've been doing is changing warbands, like not just like every week, but like every game.
Yeah.
And then one of my other candidates is even though I had a rough outing with the Arenai, it's that kind of magpie brain where it's like, oh, there's still new stuff to be explored with this, and so
new
kind of considering them. So it'd be them, or maybe if painting becomes a primary concern, it might become the kind of crew, because I'm pretty happy with the paint job I pulled off on them. And it might be nice just to show off something after my shameful display last year. It might be nice to bring something a little nicer looking, but we'll see.
Nah, not shameful.
Not prideful.
No, but
yeah.
I was actually just thinking, I think because Skylar has been joining you in playing a few other new war bands as well.
Yeah.
And one of our other local folks,
Ben's been doing the Lord's work too. Yeah. That's been good.
So I was even going to see
what the count is at.
We've seen 36 unique war bands, and I know Soul Raid got played after that count, so it should actually be 37.
So we're at like 10 or 11 to go, depending on if you count. I think we'll be wrapped before Arenai are actually released.
Yeah, that's true.
So I could trim that number by 4, but that's what I'm saying is I think I need help, and a couple people are going to get a little serious at the end with to try to win the league.
What? No, we've only got one week left to compete.
one week to make the final 4, right? Next week's week 7.
Yeah, and then it's at that point then you're in the tournament mode. So
yeah, last week I brought Thorns, which was really fun to bust them back out. Haven't played them in a long time, and I brought Eyes of the Nine, and was getting ready to plop him down.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right. So Brian had challenged me. I was like, all right, let's see what Brian's playing. If he's in for the memes here, where we're trying to get all the war bands played, like maybe I'll have a chance at this. And he's like, I have Gnarl Spirit and Tooth and Claw. I was like, oh my god. Okay.
Yeah. He's in full Adepticon mode. I don't think he's doing anything other than that until Adepticon.
It was one of those things, and we've talked about it before, where I was like, as we were playing and like card after card was coming out, I'm like, I'm pretty sure that this would be an illegal deck in championship play. I think there's got to be more than like 3 restricted in this Nemesis deck. This is brutal.
Yeah.
I had some pretty lucky dice to keep it closer than it should have been, but couldn't hold the course.
Yeah, I believe you only lost by 1.
I did. I was angling. I think he had to draw into what's that? Move or die? What's the one where everybody has to have a move or charge token?
Yeah, that's it.
He correctly figured out that was the bottom card in his objective deck, drew into that, and 1 by 1, because I had the tiebreaker. I was on an objective and he was not. But I did need dice to get there. I needed Kachark to crit a defense and all that. So I think I was playing like...
Still, though.
Yeah, I felt like I was playing really well, getting really good luck, and that was enough to like keep it close. So, which is fun. But I mean, it was a fun game regardless.
Yeah.
That's kind of one thing. Anyway, I think that's enough waffling. You got anything else you want to hit, or should we jump into the main topic?
Well,
here?
Like you said, we've been rambling. Let's get on to the main topic, the main show, if you will.
Oh, I will.
Some gladiators.
Yeah, we're talking about. I believe we're going to say her name, Gryselle. Gryselle's Arenai. They are daughters of Cain, and they are coming to battle beneath the Gnarlwood to worship the bloody-handed god. That is what's up with them. It's a 5-fighter warband. We're going to cover a number of things. We're kind of do our traditional thing where we go through the cards. We did get some play experience with them. We'll talk a little bit. That's informed some of those. Do you remember what your first impression of them was when you saw them?
I do.
If you wanted to kind of summarize it in just a couple sentences, and then we'll kind of talk after about what our experience with them, how that has shifted.
Yeah. So a lot of the times when we get these cards and I do the reviews, I sort of form opinions one card at a time, which I've realized in doing our reviews in the past is that like that tends to mean that I need to go back through at the end and then re-review after I've read everything. So this time I was like, all right, let's read all the cards first and make sure we understand how the deck's supposed to work. Yeah. And the general idea that I got was that like, okay, this is going to be a hyper aggressive warband, very fast, and like they're kind of just going to be Mad Max style, like powered, like full pedal to the metal. Defense is somewhat secondary. Like they just want to get in and get damage down, and they don't really care how it has to happen. And I figured from a lot of their cards, and we'll get into this in a little bit, is that they really like to be able to take advantage of combo. And so that it's like they like to stack a lot of the cards to sort of have this built up advantage. But that means that they are going to need a little bit of work to get started.
Sure.
I was also thinking that despite their very low wound count, so they have this ability called acrobatic. We might as well just mention it since I'm talking just about their survivability. This is just like the Nurgle ability, except that it triggers on a dodge roll instead of on a shield. So anytime in their defense roll that they roll a dodge, they will reduce the damage dealt by 1 to a minimum of 1.
Yeah.
So my thinking was, well, with that ability, despite the fact that 4 of the 5 fighters have 2 wounds, they're probably going to be slightly more survivable than that. They'll probably play like they have 3 wounds. And so that's sort of what I was expecting after first reading through the deck.
I mean, it is worth it's that worm spec conundrum where like I should probably attack these guys with like 1 more damage than I need just in case they roll that,
just in case,
that shield. So that's fair. That is mitigated somewhat in a ping heavy environment, but I mean, making people spend the resources is making them spend the resources. So
absolutely.
So I think my first impression was very similar. I was like, there is nothing about this warband that doesn't look aggro. Like, their objectives, their upgrades, and their gambits are pretty much all that way. Which was, I don't know, I don't want to say surprising, but some other warbands that you might have expected to be like 100% aggro. I think even Gore Chosen care a little bit about like positioning, like being in the middle of the board sort of thing.
Gore Chosen do a lot.
These ones are like the only positioning stuff is like, are you in enemy territory, or like are you standing next to people or next to wounded people? So there's a little bit of positioning there, but it's like aggro positioning. In a way that, that we'll talk more about this later, but in the way that like the Blade Coven, which is an obvious like point of reference, they had a number of things that cared about standing on objectives or killing people on objectives or some such. So, but I think I want to wait a little bit more on that comparison until later. So, Phil, you kind of already hit the acrobatic ability that is central to all of their cards. Why don't you kick us off with Gryselle herself?
Sure. So Gryselle's the leader. She's the only fighter with a keyword. She has the priest keyword. Doesn't actually show up on any of the cards, so don't get too excited.
None of their action cards, right?
Yeah. Nothing in the deck cares about that keyword.
And to be fair, very few universals care about it.
Almost none. So
the door remains open, at least.
Yeah, door is definitely still open. Priest could become more of a thing, but as of right now, not really. She has a pretty good, I wouldn't say great, but like pretty stout stat line for a leader model. It's 4 move, 2 dodge, and 4 wounds. So she's not shifting probably anytime immediately in the game. And 4 speed is respectable. You're not like crazy fast, but that's faster for, you're not having to worry about getting where you want to go.
Yeah.
And then she's got the Artist's Blades, which is a 1 range, 3 fury, 2 damage attack with combo and Grievous 1. So, with that 3 fury, there is a roughly 50% chance that you're going to be able to spike to 3 damage, which is pretty good. And then she'll inspire off of crits, and this is sort of a trope with the entire warband, is that they have this sort of dual inspire mechanic, which is similar to the Blade Coven, except that the Blade Covens were all the same 2 conditions. Here it's 3rd round, everyone inspires, or you do their other thing, and they're all different. So you have to kind of track who's doing what when, because you can kind of easily forget.
What does she get out of her inspire?
Yeah, and so once she's inspired, she becomes extremely accurate. She goes up to 3 smash, and she gets 1 extra movement. So not the most important fighter to inspire in the warband, although I would never be too upset about having a 3 smash attack. Yeah.
I think the only other thing I'd mention about her is that with 4 wounds, her 2 dodge her 2 dodge defense is becomes more important, because it's more likely that you're going to have to hit her more than once. It's more likely that acrobatics going to kick in at some point. And so those defensive tricks and defensive profiles get better the higher wounds you are, and so she takes advantage of those better than most of the rest.
Yeah, I think she's probably doing a lot of the heavy lifting in the warband. Would be my sort of first impression, and
Sure.
That should help her to do so. Just because everybody's going to have to do that much more work.
Yeah. Next, we've got Calexis the Silvered Blur, and this is I'm gonna say she's the weirdest fighter in here.
Yeah. Very
strange. She starts with 5 move, which is super cool. I got to pull off a pretty long charge move in the first round of our game. I'm not sure if it took you by surprise or not, but I have not often played as any of the Skaven warbands, so
right.
having a move 5 fighter right in the first round of the game was kind of a novelty to me, and it probably surprised me more than it surprised you that I could get that far into territory. So it felt pretty good. But yes, 5 move, 2 dodge, which is by and large everything we see in this warband. Also 2 wounds, which unfortunately is by and large what we see in this warband. And then this weird attack. So it starts out like just the raw stats are awful. Range 1, 2 fury, 1 damage. It does have combo, and then it has the blur ability. And of course, she also has acrobatic. The blur ability says after this fighter's attack roll 1 attack dice for each success you rolled, including critical successes, and add these dice to the roll. So what this means is that if you don't give her any help and she rolls, like a crit and a sword, then she gets to roll 2 more dice and add those in. So we'll talk more about that in a second, because the backside of her card, her inspiration is if she ever rolls 4 or more attack dice in a single roll. So blur can help there. Unassisted, she's very unlikely to ever hit that, right? Like,
almost never.
Yeah, it's mathematically really unlikely. I think it's, well, not really. It's like a 1 in 9 that she just naturally do it if she doesn't have any support or any extra dice to start. Mm-hmm. But that gets rapidly gets a lot easier if you ever give her any help with that. So as soon as she gets even 1 more dice on her attack roll, that's actually fairly likely to happen, because then all she needs is 1 success in that dice roll, and then she's flying. And she gets some good stuff out of Inspire. She becomes more accurate, jumps to 3 fury. And that's more than just jumping to 3 fury, because now all of a sudden she's rolling 3 dice baseline plus adding anything she gets from blur. So every time you add a dice to her, it's kind of adding like 1.5 dice ish would be my rough.
Yeah. I think that's pretty fair napkin math way of saying that.
Yeah, super fudged, but and then a point of damage, which is pretty crucial for this warband, and then all the way up to 6 move, which is almost more than you need. It's a lot.
Yeah, but I mean that's as fast as the fastest fighters in the entire game. So
yeah,
if you're getting where you need to go at 6.
Yeah, but at this base profile, it's very hard to inspire her without help. So you got to find her some card help. The other possibility is if you can stack supports, where all of a sudden her dice faces are much more likely to show successes, or do both of those things and get her inspired and make her more relevant.
Yeah.
I guess the other way is you could just give her like the cursed boarding pike or something, and then I mean, you just don't care about blur then, but still, you just roll 4 dice straight. Yeah. So that's Calexis there. Also my favorite model in the warband. There's some cool ones, but she is like so low to the ground and full out sprint. It's very cool. So.
Yeah. I mean, all these different fighters all sort of do. I mean, we've said it a couple of times, but they're really leaning into the like gladiator thing. Mm-hmm. In that, in gladiatorial combat, they would intentionally be like, okay, everybody's going to be equipped differently because that's part of the show. Mm-hmm. You have these different strengths and weaknesses that are forced by the equipment. And so all of these fighters all have different equipment. And some of it is like similar to what you would see in some like old Roman, depictions of like, this is how they would equip these types of gladiators,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool. But in her case, like she actually has like armor that's bladed, which is pretty crazy. I don't know what she's supposed to be doing with that. That is not
Yeah.
very Roman, but that is definitely something that feels very like pit fighter. Like I'm just gonna jump on you and cut you to pieces.
Yeah. Well, speaking of gladiators, here's one that I think a lot of people recognize. What can you tell us about Ritaria the Entangler?
Yeah, well, if you couldn't guess, she's got a net, which I think people are familiar with that sort of trident net style of.
Here's a historical note for people. Ritarius was a specific kind of gladiator that fought with they were in this sort of styled as a fisherman, so they got a trident and a net, a weighted net. So little nod there. She does not have a trident. She just goes for the spear. That's
just
fine.
Regular spear. It's good. It's fine. Yeah. It's fine. But yeah, she's sort of your I don't know that she's actually the second in command. I didn't pay super close attention to that kind of stuff in the story card, but she is definitely the second best fighter in my opinion. She is 4 move, 2 dodge, 2 wounds, which I guess we could say at this point is going to be the case for everyone except for one more fighter. So we can just say it has the standard base stats, but her weapon, reach 2, 2 smash, 2 damage. 2 damage is important because nobody else except for Gryselle starts with 2 damage.
Yeah.
So you got to care about that. And she's got combo because everyone's got combo as well. And she's got stagger base at range 2.
Yeah.
And so I think with this warband, when you're wanting to be able to sort of guarantee your hits, you've got these low damage. So you're sort of like low quality but high volume of attacks with combo. Stagger is sort of like the perfect mechanic to try and help leverage that to get that extra reroll. So
2 range, 2 smash, 2 damage. That on its own, I'd be happy to see that on one of my line fighters like that, and then just throwing stagger in the mix is nifty.
Yeah, absolutely. And then she's got a one special ability. It's called Vault. So when she makes charge super actions, she's considered to have the flying trait. So she can jump over people while she is charging, which can help her get into position a little bit better than the other fighters. But they're also fast. That I do question how important this is. But against like the zombies, for instance,
flying and range 2 attack means that Daintalos is really kind of sweating bullets wherever he's at.
Yeah, he's not happy about that at all. Yeah, and so then her Inspire actually pairs with her weapon, and that she needs to stagger an enemy fighter. On first read, I thought, that should be easy enough. Has the downside, though, of if you kill the fighter that you are targeting, you will not Inspire. Because you can't stagger somebody who didn't survive. Yeah. So, a little less good than I thought. But still one of the more reliable Inspires, I think.
Yeah.
And on Inspire, similar to Gryselle, she does not gain quite as much as some of the other fighters. She goes up to speed 5, and she has Smash for 3 instead of 2. One thing I'm just realizing as we're looking at these cards right now.
I know what you're about to say. Go for it.
She loses her vault ability.
Oh my God, where'd it go?
Because now she just always has the flying trait.
Yeah. That's kind of cool. I can't imagine that's too big of a difference. It just means now you can move and fly instead of charge and fly, but that's cool.
Yeah.
I guess there's probably some corner case like card effects, upgrades, or gambits that
there's a few, but I think the only ones I can think of off the top of my head, like you need to have flying and be a companion or something to really gain a lot of benefit.
Fair enough.
So I don't know, but it's cool that she has that as a thing. Like it's just, hey, there's another fighter who's doing something different.
Yeah.
Overall, I think this is my favorite fighter in the warband. I think her styling is really cool. The models are all very dynamic.
Yeah, she's got this cool arching leap to her. Like it's really, really rad.
Yeah,
like
very, very cool. Lots of. You didn't touch on it. You built the models for us to play with, and
that's right. Yeah,
a lot of these poses are really great. But what was your experience in actually putting them together?
This might have been the hardest Underworld's warband I've ever put together. I think it's a function of the very dynamic poses and the very slender limbs. Means that there were certain ones where I had to, when you are building this warband, make sure you dry fit multiple times. Make sure you get everything lined up, and you're going to want to take a look at multiple image angles. So I would look at kind of the actual assembly instructions and be like, I can't quite figure out like what angle this armament or this shield or whatever is supposed to be at, and then I'd go and take another look at like the sort of album cover pose of all the models together, and to get a different angle, be like, okay, like that arm is supposed to be straight up or just totally horizontal or something, and come back and get it. So very challenging, but very, very awesome. I like the figures a lot.
Yeah, they're very cool. Another coolly posed fighter, Thriala.
Yeah.
I can't quite decide how this should be pronounced. If it's
the Thriala from Maniala.
Yeah. What about her? What is she doing?
This is the one that is carrying a whip and a spiked buckler. And I am going to try to pull off the top of my head. Lethem, don't kill me if I get this wrong. But it's very similar to the Morgwaith fighter. I'm going to say it's Camus. Camus is the whip fighter in that warband.
Yes.
Who also has a bladed buckler and whip. This is the only fighter in the warband that starts out with a weapon that can react to her combo ability. So her whip is range 2, 3 fury, only 1 damage. And then that has combo, and it can react with the bladed buckler, which is range 1, 1 smash, 1 damage. It has the follow-up keyword on it, but that just means that it can react. I don't know if that's a templating thing where they need to have that on there to be able to point you in the right direction. But
yeah, I did actually go back and look because I was curious if this had ever shown up before. And I think this might be a new templating thing that they're probably going to use going forward, because all the old combo stuff didn't have any keywords to it at all. It would just be a weapon, and then it would have a reaction that just said, after a combo attack that hit, you can make this attack action. Important distinction here. All of these follow-up attacks in this warband say reaction after the fighter's attack action with combo, but it does not say anything about a success.
Yeah, big deal.
Yeah.
So Thriala, I'd be interested, if Camus would trade for this. So Camus actually has 1 more point of damage on her whip right to start out.
Yeah.
Which actually would be pretty nice, but Camus starts with only the 1 dodge. Thriala's got 2. So trades happen. Not all whip wielding witch elves are the same.
Oh.
Well, Thriala actually has in my opinion, one of the better inspire conditions in the warband, in that all she has to do is make an attack action as a reaction. Now, 95% of the time, you're probably going to do this with a bladed buckler, but you could do it with a different combo weapon if you put that upgrade on.
Yep.
You could do it with the opportunistic reprisal if you were, running with the Fearsome Fortress deck where you reacted as an attack. So in the few other ways where you can make a reaction attack, you may find a different way. But again, it's right there on her card. She can do it that way. For Inspire, she does get 1 extra point of damage on the whip and 1 extra point of movement. Yeah. And that is pretty much it. But that point of damage is pretty nifty. So
yeah. And having that free extra attack, despite the range difference, which kind of can be a little bit frustrating. Yeah. I mean, you're not going to hit with it very often, but it's essentially just a free extra point of damage. So like, it's never a bad thing to have. And so she's always threatening 3 once she's inspired, which is nice.
Yeah. And this sort of thing, we'll talk more about the combo mechanic as we get into some of the other cards, but you have a little bit of the Rip his Snarlfangs effect, where you're like, say you're going in on somebody, like, I really only have to do 1 damage to this fighter. It's really nice that I got 2 tries at it.
Yeah.
So that's a spot where this multiple attack thing shines more than stacking all your damage behind a single attack. And that leaves just I want to say kind of a little bit bewildering Traxia. What do we know about Traxia here?
Well, she forgot the team memo. So she showed up to work with a big shield and a sword. Everybody else is dancing around with their knives and dodging attacks. She's just like, oh no, I'm gonna stand here and take it. Which is a terrible idea because she's speed 4, 1 block, 2 wounds. Yikes.
Yeah.
Not what you want to see.
Yeah.
But she's also the most accurate fighter out of the gate, which is pretty cool. She's got range 1, 3 smash, 1 damage combo attack. So, I mean, you don't love it, but it's almost guaranteed to hit in the early parts of the game. So I guess if you just need to put a damage on somebody, she's your fighter.
Yep. Exactly what I needed her for.
Yeah.
She has another ability on her card.
She does. So this is their new crit templating. So she's got this crit ability, and it looks very strange on the card because it doesn't actually read like a reaction, but it technically is. It's just saving some words, and this is actually something that's new in the Gnarlwood rulebook, but we had kind of forgotten about it when we were reviewing the cards, and it's like, oh, this looks weird. But it's in there, and it specifies the timing for when these crit abilities trigger during rolls. So it is all very well spelled out. Yeah. And so the way it works is that if she rolls this crit on defense, she will deal 1 damage to an attack, 1 damage to an adjacent attacking, an adjacent attacker targeting this fighter.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've seen this on a couple of different, or maybe it's just one power card, where it's like, if you roll a crit in your defense, you can deal 2 damage to your attacker.
Yeah.
And she basically has the same thing, but on 1 block, you can't really rely on this. You got a 1 in 6 chance, and you better hope that you survive when you roll that crit, because otherwise it feels a little silly, because it's like, oh, I got 1 damage, I guess. And because she has this ability, of course, they tied her inspiration to it as well. If she uses a crit ability, she will inspire.
Honestly, that feels like the roughest part of it for me.
It is
that she has to roll a crit on defense. That's one of the most restrictive inspires I've ever seen.
It's pretty bad. Now, of course, you could give her a different crit ability, and she could still trigger off of it. But innately in the warband, there's one way to do that. You can give her Grievous.
I guess I didn't think about that.
But it's still not great. I mean, it's essentially still saying roll a crit and an attack or a defense at that point. Yeah. And base, it's specifically roll a crit in defense, which, man, that's not something you want to be relying on. So definitely the hardest fighter to inspire, I think.
Yeah.
She actually does similar to some of the other fighters, where she gets the damage and the speed bump from the inspire, which is pretty nice, because then she's at 3 smash and 2 damage. And her crit reaction, if you are relying on getting that, does go up to 2 damage.
Right.
And maybe that's enough of a deterrent that your opponent looks at it and is just like, I can't risk you like lucking into killing my fighter.
Yeah. We'll talk more about deck building, but if you find a way to get an extra defense die on her, that gets much scarier, I think.
I would agree.
She's more likely to survive attacks. Like the chance of your upside versus your downside really kind of shifts when that happens. So.
If only she was a brawler. Oh well.
Uh, so that is the fighter overview. We are going to talk a little more about like kind of big picture stuff at the end. But did you have any other thoughts about the fighters in general before we kind of hit our highlights for objectives?
Nah, I don't think so. I mean, they're, like we said, very aggressive. What they want to do seems very obvious when you look at the fighters. It's like get into the mix of things and land a bunch of small hits, which is, it's different.
Mm-hmm.
And I can appreciate being that they want to have the different warbands feel unique. So
yeah. Well, all right. Let's talk objectives. So, our usual disclaimer on this section is we will cover the ones that are most interesting to us. And interesting doesn't necessarily mean good or great. It just means we think they're conversation worthy for one reason or another. Maybe because they are fatally flawed in a particular way that we think is worth talking about, or because we're excited to use it. Could be any of those. So we'll do a little bit of back and forth. Phil, do you have one you want to talk about right out of the gate?
Well, there's one that I would perhaps quantify as the elephant in the room, in that it is their big, eye-catching 3 glory end phase card. And it's like, oh man, you got to run that, right? But I think we should probably break this down. Sure. It is worth discussion. It may be worth playing, but I think it's not an auto include, despite having the big 3 at the bottom. So this is In Praise of Cain, and you can score this in an end phase if each surviving fighter has 1 or more charge counters and or 1 or more wound counters. So very, very important word that is not there. It is each surviving fighter, not each friendly fighter, not each enemy fighter. It is all fighters. So the trick with all of these end phases that say do a thing if all fighters on the battlefield have done a thing, is that your opponent can very easily just say, I'm not going to charge one of my fighters.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you have to work very hard to figure out how you're going to make this happen.
Right. Lay a point of damage or kill that one.
Yeah.
And there are certain warbands that really make this hard. Hexbane jumps to mind with the dogs who very rarely charge. And the Soul Raid, the fish. Fish is a real douche there, because it's not only will it not ever charge, but it's never going to have any wound counters on it. And it's going to keep coming back. So the Soul Raid, they don't make this impossible, because you can kill the fish if you time the kill correctly. They just make it extraordinarily difficult.
You'd have to do it like final activation of the round, killing the fish. Like,
you can sometimes kill the fish like you just have to get the that's true. The shoal counter has to be out. You could kill the fish and then cover the shoal counter. There's some ways to do this, but it's putting a huge amount of work in because of the fish. Now sometimes with Soul Raid, they might be out of fighters. I've played some Soul Raid games where I'm down to just like one fighter in the fish. And so if that one fighter is charged and isolated, then maybe you can't afford to focus on the fish.
Focus. Yep.
As ridiculous as that sounds.
Sometimes it happens. But so I guess the main thing for me, I was reading this, was like, this feels like a card that's going to trap people. They're going to think, oh, I'll definitely play this. And then they'll realize mid-game, like, oh, no, it doesn't work the way I want it to. And so I think it's just important to highlight that and just say, like, hey, if you are going to use this, do so with caution and make sure you've got the right tech to play into it. Similar to Rivers of Blood. And there's another one in Drum where you're trying to wound every fighter. And it is surprisingly difficult. There's a few power cards that can help with that. The prevalence of ping certainly makes it easier, but I would not say that it is simple by any means. Maybe they'll revive Shardgale and it'll become simple again, but I would be surprised. But that is the one.
That one. Yeah.
What Let's
I'll go
jump
with
in on
another
2.
end phase. This is Harkuron Hurricane, which I think we're obligated to pronounce as if we were the Scorpions, like Harkuron Hurricane.
Yes.
But this is a two glory hybrid end phase. 3 or more friendly fighters are in enemy territory, or each surviving friendly fighter is inspired. That becomes an auto score in round 3 because you will inspire everybody. A 2 glory third end phase on its own is probably not worth it. Although auto score, unless you are wiped out, is pretty nice.
Yeah.
This feels scoreable round 1 or round. Well, gosh, I mean, even round 2. It's the thing is like, what does 2 dodge do for you, right?
Yep.
Is 2 dodge enough to see you through? We've all played enough. Well, many of us have played enough games against other 2 dodge warbands, mostly thinking of Mournflight here, where you're like, man, I just can't land a hit. They keep on digging a crit out of their 2 dice defense rolls, and it is exasperating. So I do actually like this, and because of the dearth of 2 glory end phases out there, I think this finds its way into a lot of our Arenai decks.
Yeah, for sure. And I think especially in Nemesis.
Oh, yeah.
In Nemesis, where you're like your end phase options are pretty bad, to be perfectly honest. Having something that's almost guaranteed in round 3, I think feels pretty good.
Yeah. What do you got?
Yeah, so so there's 2 surges that I think are both worth highlighting because these are going to kind of be the things that kickstart the warband, I think. In that you really kind of need one or maybe even both of these. So maybe you mulligan pretty hard to find one.
Particularly in Rivals or Nemesis play.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, I don't know. I mean, you've got a lot of good options in Championship, but these are both quite simple even there. So, but I'll start with Storm of Blades. So this one is a surge that you can score for making your warband's 4th or subsequent attack in the same phase. So normally that would sort of read as make like 4 charges or something. But all of your fighters have combo, and your upgrade deck has access to weapons that can be used as reaction attacks from combo. So this could mean you've made as few as 2 charges, and you've managed to pick up a surge. And it doesn't care about hitting with the attacks at all. This is not let the blood flow. You do not need to make 3 successful attacks. You just make 4 attacks. So very reliable. You just need to have enough fighters left in the warband to make all those attacks. And, if you're getting this in round 1, it should be pretty automatic.
Yeah, unless unless somebody's playing very defensively. I've had a few Hexbane's got not Proof of Guilt. Shoot, I'm gonna get lynched by the hex heads out there for getting this one.
They've got the same sort of deal. They make a certain number of attacks.
Yeah, due process. Due process. I got there. I was about to look it up and came to me. Due process. That has the out of did I just get 2 successful ones, so that can score pretty early in the round.
Yeah.
But even that, I've had to occasionally play suboptimally if somebody was hanging back, and they've got access to range 3. I will say though, range 2 does make this easier in later rounds.
Sure does.
If you've got a fighter that can take some attacks before she's got to go charging somewhere, because that is a way that this can get hard. Is if you had to charge every time, then as soon as you had less than 4 fighters, you might be in trouble.
I just like that they've got this surge that doesn't have any sort of success clauses to it. So it's just like,
no dice needed, no success.
Just do the thing that you're going to do, and hopefully you have enough actions for this to score.
Yeah.
It's a nice seed glory.
Yeah. I think the partner to that, the one you were going to reference, is probably Ritual Performance.
Yep.
This is a surge hybrid. Score this immediately after a friendly fighter's attack action. If that attack action resulted in a critical hit, or that attack action dealt precisely enough damage to take the target out of action. We've seen this once before in Velmorn.
Yeah.
Maybe more than that, but that's the one that springs to mind for me. And it's pretty nice. You have it has existed in the past as only half of that. There used to be a surge that was for killing exactly precise use of force, and that saw a fair amount of use.
Yeah.
So, and I think a lot of times you will end up killing things exactly with that clause, right? Because I think a lot of times you will, like, okay, I've left this fighter on one. Now one of my many one damage attacks has to go, finish it off. But by having that first half of the clause, then you are not disincentivized from using an attack that has grievous, which is nice. So
Absolutely.
yeah. There's a couple that reference flourishes, but I actually want to save discussion on those until we get to the flourish gambits themselves.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They have very little in the way of positioning ones. I did mention the one that was the not Hark Huron Hurricane. Talked about half of that is like have 3 fighters in enemy territory. There is one that is Blood on the Sands. This is one glory end phase. Scores an end phase if one or more friendly fighters are within 1 hex of one or more enemy fighters with 1 or more wound counters. That is doable. It just feels like also and not in your territory.
Yeah, that's the kicker.
Yeah, like I feel like you could have left one of those clauses out for a one glory end phase. Like you could have had it be in any territory, or you could have had it be that they don't have to have a wound counter, and then it would still feel okay. It was a little, I think I saw it and dismissed it. It did feel a little easier to get than I initially thought, but it should be really easy and reliable for a one glory end phase, and it's not that. I think I mentioned that I feel like as it's written, it's like a 1.5. Glory.
Yeah, you kind of wish that it would give a little bit more, but it doesn't.
Yeah. Like you could have done it as a 2 glory, but then your fighter that is in that position takes 1 damage, which might be terrifying in warband with such low wound fighters. But
yeah, it'd be scary.
Anything? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just thinking, like, the other way that we've been seeing some things recently, and actually in this power deck too, is getting spent glory. So if they wanted to add a secondary clause onto here that was like, it's normally 1, but if you do it a little better, you can get an extra spent glory.
Sure.
But
sure.
That's not how it was designed. So we don't need to live in magical Christmas land.
What about you? Anything else you want to cover in here?
There's a number of other like playables, but like nothing that's like super great that I'm reaching for all the time.
Yeah.
So honestly, probably not. We'll have all of the cards and our thoughts on them in detail up on the blog as well. So if there's any of these cards that you're like, we would really like to know what you thought of this one, it'll be up there.
Dear idiots, why didn't you talk about...
How did you not catch this?
Yeah.
Well, we do our best with our monkey brains, but sometimes we miss things.
All right. Well, it sounds like we're on to gambits.
Yeah.
And we've already talked about the elephant in the room, so maybe this is the hippopotamus in the room.
Sure.
We're going to talk flourishes here. I'd like to talk to them right off the bat. So, if you are unpackaging this product and flipping through the deck, you will have seen 2 surge objectives that reference flourishes, and these, I think one of them is if 2 flourishes are persisting and you get a successful attack action, and the other is these are both 1 glory surges, and the other is if there is 1 flourish existing and you take an enemy fighter out of action with an attack action. And you would understandably say, what is a flourish? Well, there are 5 flourishes. They are gambits that persist. They all persist until a successful attack action has been made or until the end of the round. There's a little way to fudge that later. And they all have some benefit and also a drawback, except for actually they do all have a drawback.
All have a drawback, so, just of varying degrees.
Yeah, and it's tough because So the bonuses are, there's one that gives you +1 attack dice, but the penalty is -1 defense dice. There's one that is, if you're attacking somebody who is unwounded, your attack characteristic becomes crit instead of smash or fury. That means only crits are yikes, so better attack something wounded. But it does give you grievous. There is one that is just straight up +1 damage, but the downside is that if you miss, you take 1 damage. There is one that gives you flying while charging, but says that the only way you can attack is if you charge. And I think the last one is, it gives you all your attacks, your range 1 attack actions no longer have combo, but your range 1 attack actions have scything.
Yeah.
So before we talk too much more about this, do you have a favorite of these?
It's tough. I think for this warband specifically, I think Fatal Flourish, which is the +1 damage, but take a damage when you miss one, is probably my favorite, because the thing that the warband dramatically needs more of is damage. Almost all the fighters are base 1, and the highest damage base is 2 with Grievous. So there's just going to be times where you're facing down Drom and you're like, okay, I've got to kill a 4, a 5, and a maybe 6 wound fighter with 1, and they get resources every time I hit them. I don't want to hit them 6 times.
Yeah.
So I do like this. It's nice. So the thing that I thought of when I read these was like, it's nice that they all have combo, in that you get multiple chances at taking advantage of this when you use the card.
Right.
But then that comes back to the thing that I was talking about earlier, where you're having to stack these resources to kind of juice these fighters when you try to go in with them. Mm-hmm. And the problem with wanting to do that is that you're kind of like, it's the glass cannon effect, right? It's all in right now. And if it doesn't work, then you're kind of sunk, because all of a sudden, if you did miss, your fighter's probably in a bad position, and you now have this negative effect from this flourish. So
curiously, like some of them, the negative effect doesn't have a defensive thing. Fatal Flourish and Daring Flourish, the dice one that reduces your defense, and Fatal Flourish, the one that damages you, those you're really paying a price for.
Yeah.
But unlike other sort of gambit speed, so the thing is, like, the upside on all these kind of exists in other gambits. Like if you really want to have a scything attack and you're in championship play, then maybe you scoop up, what am I thinking of? Not
Mighty Swing.
Mighty Swing. You maybe scoop up Mighty Swing. But the difference here is that if I come in, and we've all done it before, you run into a crowd and you scything and you miss everybody. Like, oh man. This says, well, like, hey, you missed everything. It's still out there. You still got a chance to try this again.
Yep.
In some cases that is good, like, okay, well, I because think of it this way, like you said, you like Fatal Flourish, +1 damage. That card, unless you miss all the rest of your attacks for the round, you will get an extra point of damage in there somewhere. Now, if you miss all the rest of the attacks for your round, or a lot of them, you just put a whole lot of damage on your warband. But yeah, I like Spinning Flourish. I like access to some surprise scything.
Yep.
I think that's pretty rad. Daring Flourish is real scary with the +1 dice, and then lose some defense, because you're really relying on defense on those. But we talked about it, like what's the blur, Calexis, the silver blur.
Yeah.
Like getting one more dice on her, if you have that at the right time, like, well, okay, Calexis is probably, getting inspired this time, which
absolutely.
So here's the thing. All these benefits are relatively modest. There's no benefit in here like, oh my God, like I can't believe that's available at Gambit speed, right? Like, because almost all these have existed somewhere, maybe not as a universal, most of them even as a universal. Well, maybe not true. But like, the determined efforts and the mighty swings, like, the persisting is good and bad. The What do you think of comboing it with the two objectives that we mentioned, the surges that trigger off of this? And this is Lethal Spectacle and
Grandstand.
Yeah, this is Lethal Spectacle and Grandstand are the two that need flourishes to land.
Yeah. I don't mind one of them. Either one, honestly. I mean, I don't love having to have two power cards in play to score a card. I think that's probably weaker of the two.
Yeah.
Although it doesn't have to be a kill, so that's always an upside.
Yeah.
But I really don't like the deck having both.
Yeah.
The reason being is that if you happen to have them both and you have one of them in your hand and one of them in your deck, and you are holding one or two flourishes in your hand and you score one of them, you'd better hope you don't draw into the next one immediately because you won't be able to score it.
Yeah.
It's just there's this weird math of like, oh, with only 5, what are my odds that I'm going to have one? And it's like, oh, it's pretty unlikely actually that you're going to see more than one in a hand. And then if you do, you'd better hope you've got that have 2 in play when you make your attack, because otherwise it's probably not coming up, because you kind of need, in the rivals deck anyway, you're going to need to rely on these. They're half your gambits. Like they are what's driving the warband. So it's just kind of weird that they're like, oh, this thing that always goes away after you succeeded on an attack is going to trigger for 2 of your surges.
Yeah, I will say honestly, I was surprised that they had as many as 5. Like I feel like
True.
in earlier seasons they would have not recognized how many of these flourishes you would want to have in here to be able to trigger those surges. And so I think 5 is just barely enough to like make them doable. In the game that we practiced, I did end up with some tough order on this because it's not just do I have the 2? Do I have the 1 or God forbid 2 in hand to do something with it? It's, do I want to use them right now? Right? Like,
yeah, you don't want to.
I want to score the surge because, like with surges, you want to score them so you can see another card, and if they're earlier in the round, you do it. The better a chance you have to plan for the other, or if you draw into another, a surge that's dice dependent, the more chances you have to roll dice on that. And so, not only do those surge objectives require you to have flourishes, 1 or 2 flourishes in hand, but they require to use them, and you may not be, like if I've got spinning flourish in hand, which is the scything one, but no viable, like it happened with us, you're running the Starblood Stalkers, and I was like, I don't actually have a spot where I can write off I don't have a good spot to do this, to take a scything attack right now.
Yeah.
And so I'm reluctant to just use it on the chance that it'll score the objective. And so I kind of had to wait till the board shifted a little bit and all that. So there's that push-pull on top of everything else that makes it challenging.
Yeah. Very thematic, I will say.
Yeah.
They
for sure
sold out on the theme, and I can appreciate that. I don't know that it's necessarily the right choice, but I can appreciate it.
Yeah. There are 2 other cards that interact with it. One of them is a Gambit, which is Glory Reward. So there's another Glory. This is a Gambit that you react to gain a spent Glory point if you succeeded in an attack action while a flourish was persisting. That's kind of cool. It sometimes sucks to draw a power card like that, where like this power card does nothing unless I have this other kind of power card in my hand and succeed at an attack roll at the right time. But being able to get glory out of your power deck can help unlock something like great gains in championship play. So maybe, but I
don't know that you see it in champs, just because you'd have to sell too hard into flourishes.
Yeah.
The way I was thinking about it when I read it was like, this is just an objective. This is just a surge. It just doesn't give you glory you can spend.
Yeah.
And sure, it's really easy, but like, maybe don't want to do that because it's leaving you with effectively 9 ploys.
Right. The only other one I wanted to mention is an upgrade. We'll jump ahead just for this because we're in our flourish conversation here. Is Mistress of the Blade Storm. This is a card that I really am happy to talk about. I don't know if it's good, but I like what it's doing. So this is restricted to Gryselle herself. Your Warband's persisting flourish gambits are not discarded at the end of the phase, and at the start of the round, add up to 2 flourish gambits from your power discard pile to your hand. So this is a way to really kind of tweak those numbers. So I'm going to talk the plus sides of it. You can kind of tweak the numbers. So if you have like a gambit that so let's say you had a flourish at the end of the round, like I didn't find a good time to use this, but I want to be able to play it so that I've got some persisting. Maybe I'll draw into one of those surges that need it, or maybe I just want to be able to have support. It's one of the rare ways to have gambit support if you take the first activation in the next round. So, say you say like, man, I really want the first activation. I'm kind of going all in. So I will play. I mean, let's set aside the +1 dice one. Let's play the +1 damage one. There's no downside to playing that right away, because if you don't get the first activation, the penalty doesn't matter, and so it'll be available to you. But if you do get the first activation, then all of a sudden, okay, I've got +1 damage on my first attack in the next round. That's kind of cool, and it effectively is like an extra power card that you're rolling one of your power cards over to the next round without limiting your hand size.
Yeah.
So if you combine that with having played some, all of a sudden you could be looking at, I'm kind of effectively playing with 6, 7, I guess even up to 8 or more, power cards in round 2 or 3. Big downside is if you draw this in round 3, it doesn't do anything.
Yeah. So, yeah. All these at the beginning of round or at the end of round cards that, especially the beginning of round upgrades, where it's like, man, they really won't get to, there's only 2 opportunities for this to trigger in the entire game.
Exactly.
And you'll probably miss one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, they've never really worked, but the idea of this is really cool. I don't know. I worry that, like, if it doesn't come out at the right time, obviously it doesn't do anything. If Gryselle is already dead, you can't play it, and then it's just clogging your hand. Like, it's got this just great thematic feel where it's like, we just get to keep reusing these flourishes. Yeah. But unfortunately, like, I think in the execution, the math says don't run this.
Yeah. I and I think as we see, more Nemesis and Rivals play, this might be a card just to like help it function in those formats, where you're more likely to be leaning on those, and maybe you do cycle them out in Championship.
Yeah, but where you kind of have to have it just because of the, you have to use flourishes, right?
Yeah. What else did you want to mention in the gambits, though?
There's a couple that, let's see, we covered 5.
6.
6 because Glory Reward as well. Okay, we're
getting them all.
There are 3 more that I really like, and I think that does cover quite a few of them. But sure. I guess the one that I'll start with is Moment of Rapture. This is a reaction ploy where after a friendly fighter's attack action that succeeded, you can choose to do one of 2 things. You can either heal to the fighter, a little strange given that almost all of your fighters have 2 wounds, or you can inspire that fighter. We haven't seen a inspire trick gambit in a while, and I kind of like seeing it again, especially here where some of those inspire mechanics are a little difficult.
Sure.
There are situations where you're like, man, if I could just have this fighter inspired, maybe you can. All you have to do is succeed in an attack, and now they can inspire, and that is potentially pretty powerful. And I suppose if you really need to heal Gryselle, that is also a mode here. So if you draw this round 3, it's not dead. And I think that is important to have that modality. You don't want to have blank cards at any point.
Yeah. I don't, I'm just trying to head off the inevitable protests at this. We did see an inspired cheat in Green Cracks. enthusiastic dubbing.
Yes,
Right?
we did. So okay, it wasn't that long ago, but like thinking about like how many we saw in Harrow Deep and
Sure.
Nethermaze, it was like, oh, there's like this thing just kind of went away.
And this is where to include that stuff, right? Like this is a very controlled environment, is to put it as a faction card. Where we ran into big problems with it was when there were universals out there, like Inspiration Strikes, or like that. There was that that stage where there were 1, 2, 3 different ways to kind of cheat out and inspire, and some fighters are just not made for that to be possible, right? So
yeah.
I think there's any one of these fighters is fine to have them cheat and inspire out.
Absolutely. And the timing is not like, oh, in your power step before it's my activation, surprise, I've got an inspired fighter and I'm going to come get you. Yeah. It's actually has a reaction that you have to trigger, so it makes it more balanced that way as well. Because of course we've seen the in-faction just inspire a fighter, which is pretty scary.
Yeah. You said you had 3.
Go ahead and take whatever you want.
Okay.
We don't need to cover them all.
Sure. I like Unquenchable Fervor. So this is a card this is a twist on a kind of card that we've seen before. So, and we've seen before, specifically in Blade Covenant, a similar one. But anyway, this is the next time a friendly fighter is dealt damage, reduce that damage by 2 to a minimum of 1. This effect persists until the end of the phase or until damage is reduced in this way. There's one kind of piece that I'm a little uncertain on. We'll touch on that in a second. So often we've seen this card in the past, which is the next time one of your fighters gets dealt, or the first time your fighter is dealt damage in the next round, they get dealt 1 instead. Or can basically think of them as like, this fighter is only going to take 1 next round. There's some other ways around it with lethals or whatever, sometimes depending on the wording. And often what the enemy can do in that situation is say like, okay, well, I'll draw a power card this turn, or this is a turn I'll step onto an objective, or this is a turn where I will shoot you with a 1 damage bow to set up a later thing. And like, okay, I disrupted their tempo a little bit, but didn't really get the benefit of my card. This persists until damage is reduced in this way, or all the way to the end of phase, which is pretty nice. So you can play this early, right? You can play this early. And then if they miss their attack, or if they choose to stall, well, it's still sitting there waiting for them, which is great. The only thing I'm not sure is if they attack you with a 1 damage attack. You haven't actually reduced the damage because it was already 1. So I just don't know if it continues to persist after that. That's how we played it, but there may be a ruling that you kind of attempted to reduce it. So, I don't know.
I mean, I guess you could read it kind of both ways. It's saying like, okay, the damage is being reduced by 1. And what is the end result? Well, it can't go below 1, so it's still 1. So the damage was reduced. Okay, we'll reduce by another 1. It's still 1. So we did reduce by 2, but it was the net result is nothing happens. I don't know that I would read it that way, but I could certainly see that that's how it's supposed to work. But yeah, I agree. We will probably need an FAQ to make sure that that is clear.
Yeah, I mean, I think they would have worded it differently if they just wanted it to, like, if a 1 damage attack could
they probably would have just said until you take damage.
Attack, or exactly. That would be a way. So I think it probably does actually have to get reduced to be able to remove this card. So, hopefully not too many people raging over that. Was that one of your 3?
It was.
Hit me with your last. I'm gonna move on after that.
So we've got Peon of Slaughter, which
is this just in here for the vocab?
Well, no, it's actually a good card, but the vocab is also interesting. So I know I've heard this word before, but I was like, okay, I actually am not 100% sure what this word means.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that a song of praise is essentially the definition of peon, and it is a hominin of the other word, peon. They sound exactly the same, but they are spelled completely differently. And And in the flavor text for this card, it's Gryselle's voice weaves the screams of victims into a song of praise. So when I looked it up, I was like, oh, it's right there on the card.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to come up with another card because this is gonna be my flavor text quiz.
Oh no! I'm sorry.
I realized as soon as I referenced vocab, I was like, oh man, I just screwed myself.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, we'll find another one, or we can edit this out. But
give you the free win.
but what the card actually does, so you do have to have Gryselle alive to play this. But once you do, you can reroll an attack dice in the attack rolls for friendly fighters' attack actions in the next activation step. So if you have scything, if you have combo, what have you, all of those attacks that you make get a reroll.
You think combo does it? Because normally an attack that occurs after the final action of a super action would be outside that activation step.
Ooh, good point. You know what? I bet combo does not work. I would have to.
I may be using reasoning from an outdated season. I'd have to take a look.
I think you're probably right though, because the reaction is after the activation. So, because it's after the fighter's attack action, which is synonymous with after the activation. So yes, I think you're right. Combo shouldn't work. Scything would. Makes it less good than still not bad to have a single reroll, but I was kind of hoping that this would combo well with combo.
Sure.
Because that would just make sense. But no, I think you're right. It would not. The window is after the activation, and it is during... Yeah, it's only during the activation step. Unless the reaction is in the activation step now, I don't think that's right.
But a reroll here is helpful. It can help with a couple of the inspires, like making sure you hit with Retaria to get the stagger off, or get you another success so you can roll another dice with Calexis. And then of course your Gryselle is always happy to have another dice to get closer, or have another chance at triggering her Grievous. So can't complain. Could be decent. So
not bad, not great, but still okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically all the cards. I don't think we need to talk about the last one, but
sure,
it's not bad.
Well then, upgrades. There's a little bit of a grouping we can do with this as well.
Yep.
If you look at these upgrades, there are, I want to say, 3.
There are 3 cards that have follow-up reactions.
Yep. And it was funny. I was in a bad spot in our game. I had Calexis getting ready to attack, and I was like, man, her attack sucks. Right now she's uninspired, and I was like, and I had this insane thought process where I'm looking. I had an attack action in my hand, the lacerating blow. This one is range 1, 2 smash, 1 damage, Grievous 1. I was like, oh, this attack's actually way better than hers. I'll just put this on, and then I don't even have to do it as a reaction. I'll have it. And then at another moment, I was like, wait, why wouldn't I do it as a reaction? Why wouldn't I just take her? Yeah, I've got it. I was like, that's right. Everybody's combo. Okay, cool. So there's that one. And then the other 2 are range 2, which is exciting. 2 fury, 1 damage, and one of them has cleave and one of them has ensnare. What do you think of these in general?
Well, the first thing that I think is, why don't these all have the follow-up keyword? But then also, I actually like them a decent amount. None of them have the clause that says they can't be modified. So despite their stats not being great, you can very quickly turn all of these into very respectable attacks. And if you're stacking that on top of their normal attack, you're all of a sudden making a very scary fighter. And they all do something a little bit different. So we see in a lot of warbands these upgrades that are like, this fighter's attacks gain cleave, this fighter's attacks gain ensnare. And it's like, okay, well, we kind of get that, but it's on a follow-up attack instead of their main attack.
Yeah.
The extra range is nice if you need it. And then the Grievous on Lacerating Blow is nice if you just need to add some extra damage.
Yeah.
The one thing I really like with Lacerating Blow, at least in theory, is that you can combine this with Ritaria, and if she succeeds and doesn't kill on the first attack that she has, she staggers the target, and then she can attack with a Grievous attack with the reroll for the second attack.
Oh yeah, tasty.
Yeah. So
I conversely like the 2 range 2 ones quite a bit, specifically for the range 2, because your 2 range 2 fighters can then like really kind of reach out and touch a lot of different directions with them.
Yep.
And that's pretty great. Or, you know, like even your range 1 guys, they could kill somebody up close and then reach out and pop somebody who's a little further away. That range 2 is extremely flexible, which is pretty nice. So
very. And they can drive people back. So like sometimes just having that range 2, you know, Hail Mary just to drive someone back is useful. So
sure.
Definitely a good option to have.
Phil, I think we have another large mammal in the room in this. We've had one for each section. So
maybe a rhinoceros will continue with our African and large mammals. So I believe what you're leading me towards is Paragon of the Arena.
Nailed it.
This thing is crazy.
Insane.
Maybe one of the best upgrades we've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, it's in that debate for sure.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you could argue that there's other ones that are actually better, but this is right up there. So this is a upgrade that gives a reaction. This is not restricted to any fighter. You can put this on whoever you want. After you declare your attack action, you can then choose to make your fighter's range 1 or range 2 attack action have either +1 dice, +1 damage, or you can give the fighter a guard token. Wow.
I will say I did exactly, you know, so when we were talking about In Praise of Cain, so I did kind of the inverse of In Praise of Cain, where looked at that. I think I did spot. I usually don't do this, but on that one I did spot the first time through. I'm like, oh, this doesn't say friendly. And this one I read through. I'm like, oh, I must have missed some clause on here. Like this must break after the first time you use it, or like damage the fighter or something. Like I read it again and again. I'm like, no, it's just like pick whatever super awesome thing you need in the moment.
Yeah.
And because in the declare action step, you can use it on your combo attacks. You can use it as part of a scything. It's like, whoa, this is get out of here.
This is some pretty crazy stuff. And as you mentioned, like with combo, it's so nuts. You could be, so I don't know, like you put this on like Traxia, who is super accurate base, but does like almost no damage. So for her first attack, you're just going to be like, okay, I need the damage. So +1 damage. Then she uses her follow-up attack with combo. And it's like, okay, well, you know, let's say she's got Lacerating Blow on there. Well, now we've got this thing that wants extra dice because it's got Grievous. So let's jack the dice up. It's like, what in the world?
Yeah.
And then if you feel fine that your, fighter is going to get their attacks through, oh, we can just, go on guard with these 2 dodge with damage reducing dodge characteristics just in case.
I mean, in the guard thing, so like, let's say you're going in, like, it's a great reason to have one of those range 2 combo attacks. Cause I'm come flying in, like maybe even charge onto cover. I don't know. Take whatever bonus I want for my initial attack. Once that's done, kill that guy, drive that person away. Now I want to be safe from, so I'll do a poke that doesn't even matter. I'm going to do, here's a 1 damage poke. I don't even care if I hit with this. I'm just using it to put myself on guard.
Yeah.
Oof. Wow.
Feels bad.
Yeah. But it's a thing where I don't think it's busted. I mean, I think it's really good.
Yeah.
But it's only on one fighter.
Yeah.
And it's a fighter that 4 out of 5 times will only have 2 wounds on them. So
yeah, and I think that's the reason that they can get away with this in this warband is just because you probably are not just suddenly running away with a game because these fighters just aren't like so crazy on their own.
I will say this is exactly what we said about some of Hexbane's upgrades. It was like you could never get away with some of these upgrades in another warband, but this warband has such low wounds that it's
Oh yeah,
fine.
it'll never be a problem. Lucky
Oopsie.
Hex Beak Foot and the horseshoe, the darn horseshoe. Yeah, so I mean, I have earmarked this one as like watch this space because I could see this doing a lot of damage in some championship builds, and it feels like it could become a problem.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm glad that they're willing to like push the limits a little bit here and there because, you know, you don't want to be overly safe with your designs. But I read this one and I was just like, well, Lex goes in every deck for this warband. There's no reason not to. It's strictly better version of like Great Strength. Which is already an auto include. So
yeah.
Very good. Very good. How about another one? What is another upgrade you like? There's a lot of good ones here.
There are a lot of good ones. I like Star Performer. This is Wildfighters Inspired. That's actually a clause I often forget on this. Wildfighters inspired rolls of Fury and Smash are successes in this fighter's attack rolls. I think we've seen a version of this in Crushes, and I think we've seen a version of this that's like fighter restricted to Saic. But that's a big accuracy boost, especially if you are somebody who's attacking on Fury. And it's quite a fine accuracy boost if you're on Smash. The trick with this warband, of course, is getting inspired. But
yes,
it'll make the Crypt Lash and Piercing Strike, the combo ones that are attacking on 2 Fury, like more accurate as well. So,
yeah. I mean, if you can stack a few things on one souped up fighter, they suddenly become really scary. I don't know how much you want to be putting all your eggs in one basket, but if you had to, it would certainly work. I mean, like you could have a fighter come in and just absolutely maul somebody with combo in this and Paragon.
Yeah. And with as much restriction and even forsakening as we've seen in championship play to accuracy cards, having an accuracy upgrade is pretty attractive.
Yeah, absolutely.
What else? What do you like in here?
Yeah. You know, there's like I said, they've got a lot of good stuff. I think one that we've seen a number of times that is always strong and will probably continue to be good in this warband is an upgrade called Blood Sigil. And this is a -1 damage from attack actions to target this fighter to a minimum of 1. Yeah, there's not a lot else to say. The one thing I'm curious about with this one is that it is in a warband with a lot of 2 wound fighters. And with 2 wound fighters, this effect is far less useful.
Yeah.
Now, of course, it does stack with your acrobatic. So you do have a chance to, you know, double dip on damage reduction. And if you do put it on Gryselle, that makes her very hard to shift. So I'm never going to be upset about seeing a -1 damage card in the upgrade slot, but we have seen it be problematic before. So I'm always a little like curious to watch how these cards play out.
Yeah.
I guess it is of note, this one is only on attack actions. So not that it comes up very often, but there are some things other than attack actions that can do more than 1 damage. Sure. This will not affect those.
I mean, I think a good comparison point is the Hearthstone Amulet with from Miari's Purifiers.
Yeah.
That is a card that when I was playing them, I really didn't include, and it's also a meta call at the time, like how much damage is coming up. But when all fighters in that warband were 3 wounds, and it still felt like sometimes it's not worth it. But it's the sort of card that, like, great if you go for it. If you're going to go for it, think about including maybe some extra wounds. Like maybe you're leaning to the defensive side of things with the warband and not shoring up some of the other things that you might. So I think on its own, no. In combination with other things, yes. So. Yeah. And just fine in Rival/Nemesis. Like it'll be useful often enough, and has the benefit of, like you said, stacking with acrobatic. So potentially,
yeah.
I guess while we're on that, not that I think it's an especially powerful card, but Devotee of Slaughter. This card can now be given to a leader and it's +1 wounds. So in faction, Great Fortitude with an extra restriction on it. I like to see that. I would like to see that more often. Some warbands get here's Great Fortitude or Great Strength, but with but better. Like,
let's give you a reason to take both.
Yeah. And I think that might be a flip on where I was like 2 or 3 years ago, because like in the Shadespire Night Vault days, where such a huge percentage of decks were universal cards, I was like, they got to make the faction cards stronger, so we see a little more flavor and don't see everybody just kind of running the same set of universal with just a tiny bit of their own faction cards in there. But I like seeing this. So obviously, if you're playing Championship, you don't take this until you've taken Great Fortitude first. But it's a pretty modest tweak. And I think if you were doing like Great Fortitude, Devotee of Slaughter, Blood Sigil, you can try and combo that with your acrobatic and 2 dodge situation. Find some sources of guard, and now maybe you're actually making these L's kind of hard to remove.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't, and the funny thing is that like you almost don't have a reason to care about, like you don't have a lot of positioning tech, so being super survivable isn't the most important thing. What you really want to be able to do is get kills.
Yeah.
So it is a little funny that it's like, oh yeah, you could lean into being defensive, but like, does that help you? I don't know.
Right.
We haven't played them much, but I would be a little surprised that that's something. Like if I could have the choice between more damage or more wounds, I would choose damage.
Yeah. Anything else you want to hit on upgrades, or we want to kind of do some broader overview stuff?
I think we can close it out here. There's 2 more upgrades. They're both defensive. They're fine. I don't have anything that I need to say about them.
Sure. And again, we break all the cards down on the block too.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, we played a game with Starblood. It went very poorly for the Arenai. I think I scored 3 glory in the first round and did not score any glory again after that. There are some reasons for that. I mean, I think a very big moment was, highlights the danger of being low wounds with a good defensive profile. So like 2 dodge, but only 2 wounds means that sometimes like one bad roll can really start things out. And that's what happened. We had Wachi, I think, come flying in with
that spear.
Yeah. 2 smash, 2 damage attack, landed it on Retaria. So I lost my, one of the 2 fighters that get to start with 2 damage, and she's got okay accuracy too. Just killed her right out of the gate. I was like, oh, I didn't even realize until she was down. And just start looking at the other profiles. I'm like, that was actually a really big deal. I'm kind of in a lot of trouble now.
Yeah.
And then I'm looking at a warband that has a whole lot of 1 wound fighters, and I'm struggling or 1 damage fighters, and I'm struggling to figure out how I'm going to kill skinks, and that is not a good situation to be in. So
yeah, sort of this weird feeling of being like, oh wait, you like don't have any way to kill any of my fighters. That's a new and novel experience.
Yeah, I managed to get 2 of the glory early-ish. I ran over, whipped Wachi for 1 damage, and then had a scything flourish, sent in the Aegis to do 3 smash. She managed to land 1 of those attacks to finish off Wachi. And so it was like I needed 2 activations and a power card to kill Wachi, I think. It did get me a surge, so I didn't feel terrible. I was on 2 glory for that, but it was like, man, it was kind of a lot of work to kill this dumb guy. And not any collateral. The scything missed on the other guy too. So, and I think from there, I think the only other attack I hit with for the rest of the game was like 1 bladed buckler attack. I got that through, not for a kill, but enough to score the. They have an equivalent of unequal contest, which is succeed in attack with only successes.
Yep.
And nothing else hit. Nothing else hit for the rest of those.
It was a combination of bad. I mean, there was a stretch in the middle of the game where I think you made 4 different attack rolls where you didn't roll any successes. So it was like, I was ready to roll my defense, and I was like, oh, I guess I'll just put those away.
Yeah, and to be fair, some of these attacks were into like inspired autopottle, or it's like,
right.
I mean,
Like,
even
I
I
still
roll
had
successes there.
I had a good chance of surviving, but like, makes it real easy when you don't even have to roll the defense dice, right? So,
yeah,
it, I don't know. It's happened a lot in a lot of the games I've played lately, where it's like one side will be just completely dead cold, and it just turns into this weird thing where it's like, it doesn't matter what I do, like I'm losing this game because everything relies on aggro right now. And
to that effect, I think what I was noticing as I was playing on the other side is like, I had very little. I made a bad choice. You always like to try and look like what choices could I do to improve. If I were to do it again, I'd protect Retaria a little bit more. I didn't realize quite how important she was early on. I'd rather give up somebody else.
Anybody.
Yeah. And what else? Oh, I mulliganed a hand that it had one of the reliable surges, the crit or kill exactly surge, and then two reliable-ish one glory end phase. And I was like, I think I can do better than this, and I could not. But that would have been a better hand to go with, and would have gotten me rolling a little bit. As it was, like I did not inspire hardly anybody until the third round. I might not have inspired anybody at all until the third round. I think about it. And that meant, like, for some, accuracy was not great. Certainly damage was a huge problem across the board. And because there didn't seem to be a way to score glory reliably early on, it felt tough to get powered up. Like that's something that, to go back to Mournflight, they have some objectives that they can score reliably and then come in and do their other things, right?
Yeah.
Like there's this thing where it's like, if I don't get some hits or kills or whatever in the right timing or order, I'm not going to have any glory. Or I'm relying instead on like getting kills to get that seed glory, and my damage output is so low that might not happen for me. So,
yeah. Certainly a warband that feels like if it gets off, with a, misfire, you're all of a sudden on the back heel really, really badly. And if your opponent has a hard enough counterpunch, you're probably just done right there. And that's never a good thing to feel.
Yeah.
But I do wonder, and we'll have to test this out more. I think Rivals also plays a part of this, but like, if you do get off to a good start, that all of a sudden you could probably snowball pretty hard.
I have that same thought. I think you could, I mean, it's risky because low wounds and stuff, but if you are willing to risk it or get the right defensive tech, I think you could really have like a kind of a crazy, to use the term, Voltron fighter. Like,
yes.
Because if you have a combo attack available, then all of a sudden great strength is boosting the initial attack and the combo attack. Like I think you can really kind of take off to some pretty heady heights. You can have one person really doing a lot, one fighter doing a lot potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. I'd like to see it more. I think in Championship, these guys could really shine. I think in Nemesis, they still maybe are a little bit beholden to their in-faction cards, which pull them in some interesting directions. But yeah, I think there's still they're still probably a good warband. I think there's going to take some practice to kind of figure out like what's the balance here. How aggressive can I afford to be? What cards do I need to be mulliganing for?
Yeah.
I think you're going to need to be able to like make those decisions in the early part of the game to have success in the late part of the game.
Yeah. I agree. I think having played, I think I didn't recognize, and we talked about this some, but I didn't recognize how unreliable inspiration was. Of your five fighters, only one of them doesn't depend on dice in some way to get inspired. and that always feels a little tough. And given that some of them quite want to be inspired, or
yeah,
the benefits are not inconsequential for most of them. There's something there.
I think they're all pretty important in one way or another.
And I think the other thing we talked about, like I looked at the 2 dodge and was like, man, there's 2 dodge all over this warband. I remember how deeply frustrating that can be against Mournflight. But I'm also remembering the days of guard being all over the place. Like for a long time there, it was very easy to get access to guard, right? Like it's still a little bit there. Like Shadowkeeper exists, right? So you can illusion a guard onto somebody. That that's out there, but it's not in the same way it was at like Dire Chasm and Beastgrave. Like guard was much more available during those times, and these ladies would have loved that, but they don't. And so the other thing is that they're defending on this 2 dice. It can be very frustrating to attack into, but sometimes you just don't roll. I mean, all it takes is a 1 through, and against something like Mournflight, where you might have to land, a couple of hits to successfully take them down. Here, if 1 goes through, they're probably gone.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is something that is hard to quantify until you see it happen, where it's just like, oh wait, they're not actually sturdy at all. It's probably just supposed to be enough to keep them in the fight just long enough to do a little bit of something. But yeah, with 2 wounds, and I didn't really have a lot of ping going on, although there was 1 ping from
Dark Man.
Kishi.
No, not Dark Man. You don't have that.
Kishi's innate ability, he can ping.
Oh yeah.
But other than that, but yeah, 2 wound fighters in this world with like some decks that can pull out 4 or 5 pings. It's like, oh man, you could be in a world of trouble just because in the power step you could be getting killed.
Yeah.
So, not a survivable warband. I keep kind of coming back to the term glass cannon. It feels like if you could get there, you could really start tearing people apart, but you have to survive long enough to do it.
Sure. Yeah. And they don't have anything built in to benefit from their own fighters dying. There's a few that benefit from them being damaged. But
they do not have the corn stuff where it's like, hey, we like to have our fighters get chewed up. No, that is not their deal.
All right. Well, we saw the Rivals deck when we were playing, and then we decided we'd kind of split up, and you would try to build a Nemesis deck, and I would try to build a Champs deck. And we'll post links to those deck. What I'm going to do is wait until there's a Underworlds DB, the Heroes MC Rat McRat is a true champion of the community, and I suspect that by the time you're hearing this, the Underworlds DB will probably be already updated with this, but who can say for certain? But I'm going to wait till we got a good link that we can do there with that. But with those decks, so you're building a deck, and Championship and Nemesis deck building is actually starting to look more and more similar because of the plot lock thing, where one of the first things you think is which Rivals, Universal Rivals deck that has a plot card will I want to pair with. In Championship, you can then make up for, you have more flexibility, but you're still saying like, am I reaching for Fearsome Fortress, Daring Delvers, or Tooth and Claw first, and then what is there enough to fill in with? What did you reach for and why?
So I went with Tooth and Claw, which is probably not really a surprise. I was building towards Nemesis, and I felt like, given that this warband is hyper aggressive, that having more tools to add damage and add accuracy is all that they're really going to care about. And some of these some of these objectives play fairly well into what you're going to be doing anyway. Paragon of Ferocity, just get a kill in enemy territory. Toyed with, you're just hitting people and leaving them vulnerable, which you'll probably do by accident with this warband because you don't have enough damage to guarantee you kill people. So there's a few decent options there. I think really though it's mostly the power cards, gambits, and upgrades. So you want stuff like Gifted Ferocity for extra dice. I was a little hesitant to put it in, but I was thinking Feral Instincts actually is probably important because getting that +1 damage is still going to matter for this warband.
Yeah, I think in Nemesis in particular, like extra damage is kind of hard to come by.
It is. So I think you almost have to do it. I don't love it because it is restricted to range 1 and it turns you into a beast, and beasts cannot have weapon upgrades. So
yeah,
it is kind of a non-bow, but there's still situations where it's important. And then in your gambits, obviously you're going to take Dark Command and Call to Heal because they really don't have any pushes, which I was a little surprised by. And then I figured Internal Surrender probably makes sense. There'll be somebody that you just want to be like, I know that their chance of survival is too low for me to care about their extra defense. Let's just turn them into this like crazy accurate attacker. Sure. And then send them in. So I don't think you can go wrong with those choices here. So those are the kinds of things I was looking at. It's really the only great choice that you've got left. I suppose you could probably do some interesting things with Illusory Might in Nemesis as well, because those weapon upgrade illusions could actually be kind of a nice way to get the fighters to be more accurate and have some better stats before they get inspired. But I don't really love the objectives that you then have to work with.
That's a fair point. I tried my championship build with Fearsome Fortress, some because I knew you were doing Tooth and Claw.
Yeah.
Some because I know a lot of the accuracy bump. Well, also, if I'm doing championship, I have to contend with the fact that some sizable chunk of Tooth and Claw is now restricted.
Yeah.
So that, makes that less palatable. And the range one accuracy buffs have 2 fighters in this warband and potentially a couple upgrades that it just won't work on. It's just like, let me see if I can find something somewhere else. And Fearsome Fortress it was tough because these fighters don't naturally want to be standing on objectives. They don't care much about that. They do kind of like cover. So charging onto a placed cover hex that you have put on is having one to land on is kind of nice if you're 2 dodge. It didn't work great. What I agree with you that I think they really like the idea of getting their hands on a ping damage because you're likely. I mean, I talked about how many misses I had, but if you're throwing a bunch of attacks, you're probably hitting with one of them. You might not be hitting with both. And so there's increasing chances that you're going to leave somebody wounded, but not all the way dead. And so pings are a nice way to kind of seal the deal with that. So that was part of it. And then I do like some of there's a couple pushes that are decent in Fearsome Fortress, and I like some of the surges that they have in there to kind of bulk out. So reaching for that again in championship play, all of a sudden you've got access. Accuracy remains hard to find, but I was looking a little into like where can I find guard or where can I find some buffs like that, or even like an extra dice because getting to 3 dodge or something is 3 dodge or even with the Aegis getting her to 2 block. That's not nothing.
Yeah.
So those were kind of interesting to me too. So kind of playing around with that. I'm not over the moon with the championship deck I built with Fearsome Fortress, primarily because I had a hard time finding a ping that fit in well. It felt like too much of a stretch. And so I started going down like that that crazy path of opportunistic reprisal. Like, can I can I get extra attacks out here? You know, just because it combos a little bit with the whip lady and with your attack 4 times, but that was a little too crazy. But it was nice to be building. It's been a while since I built a championship deck because we've been doing a lot of Nemesis here in prep
Oh,
for
man.
Adepticon, and I was like, oh yeah, man, there's so much great. There's just like I can take sidestep, like
Yeah.
like like oh man, you'd love to
And
see
just,
it. So
I don't know, so many more decision points, and like you can really, I don't know. I like the deck building process a lot, and I miss doing that to some extent.
yeah,
But you know, it's where we're at right now. Hopefully we'll see more championship stuff soon, but
yeah,
it's still, you know, you get some of that still, but
yeah. Well, we kind of covered a lot here. Why don't you give me your parting thoughts on the warband? Like, what are your if you were to, as you're doing your too long didn't read or something like that, what would you say about?
So, you know, a cool warband, very flavorful. I think they're going to take a lot of experimentation to figure out like exactly what they need to do to make them work. I'm sure that, you know, people who love the witch elves, looking at you, Lithium, are probably going to be taking these guys on right away, figuring out all their tricks. And, you know, if you liked playing the Blade Coven, you'll probably like playing these guys because I think they feel very much like a Blade Coven 2.0, where
yeah, gosh,
they kind of came back in and were like, let's just tweak a few of the dials here and hopefully make things a little more consistent.
I totally forgot. I wanted to mention that, like, this warband more than any other we've seen feels to me like a version 2.0 of a previous warband.
Yeah.
Like, I saw it a little bit with Gnarl Spirit Pack in that they're like, hey, you know, like, let's take a look how we could do the oath things, but make them more appealing. But this one, like, it feels like, hey, we figured out a better way to do combo. You're not required to hit with your first one. Cool. Hey, like, they should probably start on 2 dodge because one is just so incredibly fragile, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's like, I mean, I already said it. It feels like a 2.0 of Blade Coven. Not that Blade Coven is utterly obsolete relative, but if you were to do like rivals between the two, my money's going on these gals pretty solidly.
Yeah. Agreed. I guess I will say, from thinking about them from championship, I don't think that they probably change the landscape in championship at all. I think they can show up. They can probably play just as well as many other warbands. But I don't think they're unseating anybody at the top.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think that's very fair. I think that's where you want warbands to be, honestly. Like,
yeah,
you don't want to have every warband that comes out be like, oh, that's the next hot thing that's going to be, you know, top of the meta, because then all of a sudden it's like, okay, we're just chasing this new meta every time a warband comes out. That's, I would rather have it just be like, oh, here's a new challenger that enters the arena, no pun intended. But, and you know, in some ways this season's been a little weird that way, in that like we had 2 warbands that was like basically didn't register in Grincrack and Velmorn, where it's just like, okay, that just doesn't kind of work. And then on the other hand, Gnarl Spirit Pack, where it was like, whoa, they're way good. And like, even without too much analysis, it's like, wow, this warband is really strong. And then we have this warband where it's like, maybe this is the Goldilocks one of the bunch, where it's like, yeah, I think we hit a nice balance here. This feels good, but not great. And it should be fun, especially for people who like this faction.
Yeah, I felt like, despite getting badly blown out in our game, I felt like, hey, there's a lot of stuff I want to explore with these. There's some tricks I want to dig into here. So that's always a promising sign of a warband to me.
Absolutely.
Any more thoughts that you want to share on this warband, or does that about cover it for you?
I think this is good for, first analysis. we need to play them more. We need to see other people play them. See more discussion on them. And I'm excited. I think this is the first warband from Gnarlwood that I'm really interested to see what people do with. Because I think there's some very interesting things here. I don't know what exactly, but I think that somebody will do something cool.
Sure. I can see that. I want to do a quick aside here. You may be wondering why we are not covering Beastborn Assault.
Oh, yeah. Wah wah.
for those who did not follow the asterisk in the announcement, it is delayed in the U.S., and so we have not received a preview copy of it. So as you're listening to this, we are probably reading somebody else's content. I'm not sure who, if the European sources or other sources have found other routes to kind of get that information. But we'll be discovering it at the same time as the rest of you, and we'll kind of take a look. And just based on what you've seen, what are your thoughts about that?
Of the cards that we've seen so far, I feel like it's going to be doing something very different. What that thing is exactly is very hard to say. We only saw 2 objectives, so I have no idea what the rest of the objective deck is going to look like. But from the power and upgrades that we saw, it feels kind of like they're leaning into maybe sort of like a weird control thing where it's like you want to be playing these denizens because we want to build towards like rewarding you for having these different types of upgrades out, which makes me think that maybe there's going to be some scoring based on having upgrades out, which is always nice, although we know from past experience that can sometimes be dangerous.
You can overshoot the mark.
But I like having that third play style. Not that we have a whole lot of the whole objective play style right now, but having the control play style exist, even in a very minor way, I think adds flavor, adds variety.
Sure.
So I'm hoping that that's going to be what it is. I hope it's not just like a different version of aggro again. But from what we've seen so far, that is not my impression.
Yeah, there's one where a little bitty critter gives you supports, and having just like searched high and low for more accuracy boosts when I was making this championship deck. I'm like, that might be fun if there's something there for it. So
absolutely.
And we've been seeing Denizen on cards since we were back in Ulgu, so it's cool to see something that cares about the Denizen, the Denizen keyword.
Lurking horror.
Kind of always, kind of always figured that they would do something with it at some point. So now we're just on Metalith watch, I think. So.
Yeah, maybe it could still come. Come. Maybe when we go to like Cayman or something.
Anyway, so we're looking forward to discovering that with the rest of y'all, and we'll talk about it another time. But that's going to do it for today. We'd love to hear from you. Either come hop on our Discord, links in the show notes, or talk to us at WTHcast on Twitter, whatthehexcast@gmail.com. We will be at Adepticon. I will be at Loose Ends because the only thing I'm doing is Wednesday night. So my official Adepticon ends as soon as it begins, but I will be there for another day or two. And so I'll have time for pickup games, it looks like, or just to hang out and chat or wander around and watch cool stuff happen. So all that sounds good to me. But we didn't even mention this was episode 99. That means next episode is episode 100. We are going to take the opportunity to cover the history of Underworlds, and that's through the lens of What the Hex. So we're going to give you kind of a recap of the podcast so far and kind of talk about where the game has been, maybe a little bit of where the game's going, but that's going to be a lot to cover. And we'll also do a drawing for who plays what in the Sleeks Bowl. An idea proposed by Sleeks Bowl, one of our listeners. It's also been its other code name is the Trash Fire Tournament. Is that right?
Affectionately named.
Yeah, exactly. Lovingly named as that. That's because a lot of us are going to probably end up playing some of your suggestions, which are purposefully crazy. So we'll get those, and then we'll kind of play through those. And after that, we'll see some Adepticon coverage. But that's what you got coming up next. Phil, the thing you have coming up next is a Flavitext quiz.
Yeah.
I hope you're ready.
Oh.
I hope you're proud of yourself for spearing my previous one. But here we go. This quote is not attributed to anyone. A fighter without peer.
I think I know what it is, but I am blanking on the exact name. It is Star Performer.
I know what you're. Oh no, it's not actually. Ooh. It is an upgrade. This is going to be the only upgrade I could pick. After.
Paragon of the Arena. Okay,
there you got it. Yeah, Star Performer actually that also fits.
Yeah, it would match for that one, but yeah.
Cool. And gosh, I was going to do Hurricane by the Band of Heathens, but I already mentioned Rock You Like a Hurricane by the Scorpions, so I think we're going to have to go with that.
All right.
Hakuran, a Hurricane. That will do it for us. For What the Hex, I've been Davy.
And this is Phil.
Cool. I just realized that because I was kind of looking over, I'm like, this chair over here is dusty, and I'm like, wait, that's my super comfy office chair that my kids got me like last year for Christmas. I'm like, why am I not sitting in that? Why am I sitting in this dumb wooden chair? Great. Cool.
Yeah. Solid.